From Screen to Shelf.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of From Screen to Shelf. This is Gabe. I'm here with my boy Chase, and we are here to do a retrospect episode. This is going to be where we go through, like, we're going to keep doing this, I'd imagine, not just with this trilogy, but we're going to go through film franchises, certain movies, and we're going to look back at them and just kind of, process them a few years later and see how we feel about them. With this episode, we are really excited to actually get into the Dark Knight trilogy. This trilogy is actually, out of nowhere, and it's old, dude. Like, when I started actually looking at the release dates, I'm like,
12 years ago was the last one.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. That's nuts. I'm feeling old now talking about this. But yeah, so we're gonna dive,
me, man. It's like, dude, I've only seen The Dark Knight Rises once, and then when I realized it was like, dude, that was 12 years ago, and I remember this movie that well. I forget movies I watched yesterday more quickly than I do The Dark Knight Rises.
Oh, well, you wanted to watch the 4K box set, too, because you hadn't watched it.
Yeah, I had never seen the 4Ks until, as of literally finished Dark Knight Rises like 3 minutes before we hopped on here.
This has nothing to do with, like, the actual films themselves, but Rises is the best-looking disc in that set,
easily.
Probably. Yeah,
100%. Easily.
Yeah. So, we're going to get into each movie. We're going to go in order. So we're just going to kind of process our thoughts on the movie and maybe, just talk about where we see it now that it's been so long. I mean, this is over a decade for this trilogy. I mean, it's been 12 years since Dark Knight Rises. So it's going to be interesting to see your take on it because, I love this trilogy. I mean, I acknowledge the lows and, the issues it has, but I absolutely love this trilogy, and we kind of talked about it a little bit when we did the Batman ranking episode, but we didn't
touched on it.
Yeah, we didn't go into specifics or the nitty gritty details. So, you've been actually going through these movies the past few days just to kind of refresh yourself. So I'll let you start it off, man, since you're fresh off the boat with Batman Begins. You just watched it again after a while, and this I think remind me, this is the one that you said during the ranking episode. This is your least favorite in the trilogy.
Yeah, like, it's still good. Like, it's honestly probably one of the best, if not the best, superhero origin movie that we've ever seen. Because it's very coherent. It gives you a lot to digest, and it gives you a lot to study about Bruce Wayne as a character. It takes a lot from the comic books, and it gives it a little bit of freedom and has, like, the Nolan flair and taste, while also being digestible for, I think, everyone from, like, 5 years old to 50 to 90 years old. I think it's one of the most digestible comic book trilogies of all time, because it's coherent, it has a fluid story, and it's well done. I do have my complaints with Batman Begins. These movies, one, are a hell of a lot longer than I remembered them being. I don't remember Dark Knight Rises being almost 3 hours long. Like,
that's the longest one, I think, because I think so Batman Begins is about like 2 hours long, 2.5 hours long.
Yeah, it's running right around there. And I wanted to bring this up to you because as I was watching, I was like, what was my complaints about? Well, one, the 4K disc, I kind of agree with people. It doesn't look good. It's pretty fucking rough.
There's something going on where it looks, I don't know. It just, it's hard to describe. It almost looks like the Blu-ray in a way. Like, I just don't see like a major uptick in detail, and the HDR really doesn't pop.
Do anything. Yeah, like, it looks really good in some areas, and then it just looks fucking soft in others. Like, it just... Literally, like, there's one of the shots with Commissioner Gordon, and, like, I can't even see the wrinkles that I'm used to seeing on Gary Oldman's face, even when I'm just streaming something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it just... I mean, it's fine. The audio is really good on it, but that's about really the only redeeming quality. But I remember what my biggest complaint about this is, and it definitely gets better as the trilogy goes on, especially in The Dark Knight Rises. But it was as soon as Bruce, and of course, spoilers, this isn't going to be just like, rough.
We're going to get into
we're going to talk about it all.
The movies.
Yeah. So spoilers for those that, skip around and stuff. So It's the I believe they were on the ice whenever like Bruce is like hunting after like that little courtyard fight. Then he gets pulled by Ra's al Ghul. So it's
Mhm.
Liam Neeson and Christian Bale fighting on the ice. Dude, I still despise like I love that scene, but I also despise it in a cinematography way. I think it's some of the worst editing that I've ever seen in a fight sequence because, dude, it's like
Really?
almost every punch that gets thrown is a cut. Like,
Yeah.
it's so disorienting, man. I do not like that. Like, it takes me out of it because I'm watching the camera and the motion
Mhm.
of, like, just constantly switching almost more than I'm seeing anything actually happen in front of me. It's disorienting and distracting to me personally. I just don't understand, like, after, like, because dude, I was stewing on it for, like, 20 minutes. I really forget what
Oh
comes
my
on
god.
after that. Like, I was just like, "Man, I fucking don't like that." Like, every time I watch that movie, it's one of the reasons, and the only justification I can see for it is it comes off almost comic book blocky in the way that it happens. You see one punch thrown, then it cuts to a different angle, and then you have a whole different action going on. That's the only justification I can see for it. But like that whole jump editing is like something that I'm just happy is it's still around, but it's not as common as it was around the time that that movie came out. It's like,
Well, they're throwing swords, right? I mean, during that
yeah,
scene.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
they're
always
having, like,
going and
intermittent dialogue, like, while they're
yeah.
taking
And that's the
jabs at
only
each
time it
other.
pauses, and it, like even then, it still will cut between them,
Mhm.
and it's just I just don't like it, man. I just don't like that the way everything else or about the movie, it works. Again, I really like Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow. I think it's, like, a great casting
Oh,
choice.
dude,
He
phenomenal
kills it.
choice. Yeah.
Honestly, like, I think that's one of the strongest things is, like, in every single one I know people have their complaints about Bane and stuff, but I really, really love all 3 of the villains, and Killian was, like this was the first one I saw way back when it came out. He's
Mhm.
got a special place in my heart, so it's always special to see that, um, how do you say it? That special little, like, nostalgia I have for
Yeah.
this movie because he's really great, especially, like, the fear moments, it's really well done,
Mhm.
while also still trying to be grounded in a realistic sense. Like the movie itself, these movies are really hard to rate. It's just kind of have feelings about them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, at this point with,
Um,
how long it's been, it's just
yeah,
nostalgia in a way.
yeah, and they're extremely well made. It's just like they don't do it as much in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises with those jump shots, like especially towards the end with Bane. They don't have a lot of that. They just really like shift every now and then, and it really just
Mhm.
focuses on the slow movement between two Goliaths, essentially,
I think
and it
so,
gets
like,
better.
that was a complaint, I think, when even I know we're on Batman Begins, but even when The Dark Knight came out, I think people were kind of complaining, and it is something I see because 'cause I've seen these movies so many times, so I can literally, like, dissect the fight sequences, and I can tell you, like, there's a guy that's getting punched, and he's fake being punched, and he's just throwing himself to the floor, and it looks so bad.
Yeah,
So there are moments like that, but that is like a common critique. It's like that some of the cuts are happening too frequently, or that like the cuts are like up too close. They're not like kind of like what you said, where it's like zoomed out backwards, where you can kind of see the entire fight and just kind of absorb yourself in it. So
yeah,
I think he did kind of learn by The Dark Knight Rises. I agree with you because there you kind of have a lot more like that. And we'll get into it with Dark Knight Rises, but like the fights with Bane are very much like kind of like framed and kind of like zoomed out, and you get
yeah,
a sense of like the environment. You get your two characters there. But with Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises, the cinematography, especially with the fight sequences, it's like quick cuts. It's like super zoomed in almost, and it's like, what's
yeah.
going on? I can give you that, but it's not enough to distract me. At
It
least,
is
at
for
least
me, dude. I
personally.
don't know why. It's enough to just, like, actually keep me thinking about how irritating it
Wow.
is for, like, a while. Like, I get hung up on sometimes in movies with that to the point
Hmm.
where I gotta rewind things sometimes. But, like, that, I don't know why. It just doesn't work. But it gets a lot better later on in the series. But then, like, to the point, like, there was one when I was rewatching Dark Knight Rises whenever like Bane breaks Batman back, and we'll talk more about that later.
Hmm.
There's like for some reason they're just so far off to the left the entire shot. Whenever they're like fighting back and forth, it's right before
Hmm.
he breaks his back. Bane is like, so Batman has the frontal assault. Bane is on the
Hmm.
defense, moving backwards, and the camera. So like Bane's right here. The camera's like has him like right here with all this dead space to the right on the
Hmm.
camera angle. It's like so some of the shots are just weird. Like, why not just have them in center focus? Like, what was the
Man,
point? Like, trying to
maybe
figure it
you're
out, you
OCD,
know?
bro. Maybe it's
Yeah.
OCD. I don't know. I
But
mean,
the
I thought
yeah,
that fight. I mean, we'll get into it, but I think that fight
yeah,
was framed beautifully. I don't know, but like,
yeah,
I mean, I'll give it to you in Batman Begins. I do think that there
yeah,
are like some close up shots, especially. like even when he's fighting the League of Shadows, you know what I mean? Like the whole instance of like where all the ninjas are kind of lined up and he's trying to find Ra's al Ghul, and that kind of would have been it could have been a maybe amped up sequence if he had kind of maybe framed it a little bit more back and just kind of gave us an entire view of what's going on. But I get at the same time
Yeah.
too, he's trying to give you that feeling of just claustrophobia, and something can just jump out at you at any time. It's
Yeah.
not enough to bother me personally. Like it
Yeah.
really isn't. I get where you're coming from though. Like if I had to
Yeah.
dissect it, which is what we're doing with these retrospects, is like we're just dissecting and getting into the nitty gritty details. I can give you that. I
Yeah.
just don't think it's enough personally to mess with me like the rest of the movie. I don't think I could be like thinking about it 20 minutes in while the dialogue is still going. And
Yeah, for sure. Me, man, I'm over there. I'm down there having steam coming out of my. I mean, I'm not really that upset, but like, I just get hyper fixated on that for some reason. So let me
did you
ask you
like
this:
it
since you've,
more?
I mean, I liked it. I mean, maybe a little bit more than probably what I let on because it's been years since I've seen any
Okay.
of these movies.
Mhm.
So like a good refresh will always bring back that nostalgia and the good feelings I
Mhm.
had for this. Way back in the day, like this movie was revolutionary when it came out. Like it completely changed the landscape of comic book movies because you had the Tim Burton ones, which again changed the landscape of what we were getting at the
Mhm.
time versus like the Christopher Reeves ones. But then you end up getting the Schumacher ones, and then comic book movies were kind of dead after
Yeah,
that.
this revitalized
Um,
comic book cinema.
yeah, it did. And like I want to say Hellboy came out the year after this. Like I single-handedly attribute Hellboy and 2004. So it was 2
Mhm.
years because Batman Begins was 2002, right? Yeah,
Batman
no,
Begins was
2005.
2005. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize Hellboy came out. Damn, he pumped out 3 in 7 years. That's crazy. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. See, it's wild how fast time goes by. But like Hellboy and Batman Begins really brought that this is for young adults and older teenagers crowd.
Mhm.
Like we aren't sitting here trying to appease like the Adam West Batman. We're not here to try to appease the 5-year-olds. We're
Yeah.
here to tell the people that grew up even with the Tim Burton ones, everything like that. And
Mhm.
that's why I respect this because like it really, really, really took advantage of that PG-13 rating. I do want to ask you this with how many times you've seen it. What's your biggest
Mhm.
praise from Batman Begins and your biggest nitpick versus the other two that we'll talk about here soon?
Biggest praise I would say is just, I mean, there's so much, dude. Kind of what we just talked about. I think like he took so many risks with this movie, especially like the choices and villains that he had. Because like at the time, I mean, everyone's just used to Joker. Everyone's just used to like Mr. Freeze. The people that we've been seeing, just like your staple comic book villains. And then when you come out, like I don't know how as a director, like at that time you come out and you're like, yeah, my movie has Ra's al Ghul, it has a
Yeah, yeah,
Scarecrow, and it has Falcone. Like he gets into the mob stuff as well. And they're
yeah,
probably like, who the fuck are you talking about? Like who
yeah,
is
yeah,
this? And the fact that he was confident enough to do that, I think I just give him so much praise for that. The other big like high mark with this thing, and it just sets the tone for the whole trilogy, is I just love how like grounded he made like the series. And that's, I think that's the biggest takeaway a lot of people have with the Nolan trilogy, is just how grounded and realistic it is. Because you could have
yeah,
gone like super, I mean that's what we're used to, is just kind of obviously the fantasy elements and the comic book elements, but the fact that he also went to the studio and said, hey, I want to make a Batman movie, but I want it to be kind of realistic. That's a huge gamble at that time. Like for us now, I think it's kind of weird talking about it. And if you're younger listening to this, I think maybe it's like weird hearing that. It's like,
yeah,
but at that time for sure, it's like not something that was done before. So I think
yeah,
he just did a great job just putting his stamp on it and doing his own thing with it. Um
yeah,
my biggest nitpick with this movie, let's think, because this is a tough one, man, because I love Batman Begins. Um,
yeah,
I would have to say my biggest nitpick with it is that there is like it does take a little bit of time for Bruce Wayne to get into Batman. I do love the
mm,
whole thing where he's training. He has like that, the mask over his face. He's kind of like slowly transforming to becoming Batman. But
yeah.
there is a lot of exposition that happens before, you get
He
into
gets the
that.
suit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
before he gets the suit. And I'm critiquing that just from like, I guess, like a general audience member. Like for me, I'm
yeah,
freaking loving it because I'm like, oh, I know what comic this is from. I know what inspired this. I know what inspired this. I know
yeah,
where all of this is coming from. But I guess like as a general audience member, I could see where it's like, okay, like when is he gonna get the bat suit? Like when is this
yeah,
happening?
yeah. I want
Um
Batman.
yeah, I want Batman. And then obviously
Yeah,
Rachel Dawes is like the biggest criticism a lot of people have with this movie. It's like she's she's a weird character, man. I feel like she's inconsistent with what she wants with Bruce Wayne. It's like, you know, be
Yeah.
yourself, and then he's like, all right, I'm gonna be myself, and then she's like, you know, I can't date you anymore. And he's like, what the fuck? Like it's just like this kind of weird back and forth thing. But you
Yeah.
need your love interest, so I'm not, you know, I'm not too opposed to that. But those are my biggest like high marks with this movie, and the biggest, I guess, drawback is that there is a lot of exposition as a origin story, for better or for worse. But I think if you're a fan of the character, you're gonna love it. If you're just a general audience, I remember my dad went to go see this after I saw it, and he was like, "Man, this is like, you know, 50% of the movie. There's like no Batman,"
Yeah.
which he just didn't care for. He thought it was boring. So, but yeah, you're asking like one of my favorite movie trilogies of all time to nitpick it and give me the weaknesses. I don't know,
Yeah.
man. It's tough, but I mean, I would say those are probably the weaknesses, and the choreography with the fight sequences, as you noted. I think
That's a
that's
good
fair.
one. That's a good point to make, because man,
But
'cause it's
didn't you
just
have like an issue with like what was it? I don't know if it was this one. There was like some dialogue that you really couldn't stand. And
mm,
was it this one or The Dark Knight? I don't remember. It was like something Commissioner Gordon said that you're like, you hated
it's
when
The
he said
Dark
it.
Knight.
Oh,
Yeah, okay,
okay.
so we can transition. That'd be a good transition into The Dark Knight. So for The Dark Knight, it's the very end, whenever I forget exactly what he says, man, because I only rewatched because I've just seen The Dark Knight so many times. I don't have it
Yeah.
memorized, but I really needed a refresher on Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises. It's whenever Commissioner Gordon's like, I didn't thank you. And then Batman's like, you don't have to, or whatever
Oh,
it is, like right after the whole Harvey Dent sequence or whatever it
uh-huh.
is. And like he's about to run off and like get blamed for the murder and everything like that. I just found it so fucking corny. Like to end such a great movie on that note, it's just corny. It didn't take me away. I just find
Isn't
it so
that Batman
corny.
Begins?
Is it?
Yeah, like when they're on the
Okay, then
rooftop,
yeah,
and
that
then
was my
he's
problem with
like,
it.
yeah, he says like, I never said thank you, and then he turns around, and he's like, you'll never have to, and he jumps off the rooftop.
Yeah, I don't know why I found it so corny. So out of play because you have so many badass lines like "I swear to God, swear to me," and then you have like,
Oh, I love that
you
line.
know what I mean? Like there's so many memorable lines, and then I think that's some of the things like Dark Knight. I don't have that same complaint with Dark Knight Rises. There kind of is here and there. I have some nitpicks with it, but I really do love Dark Knight Rises. But like Dark Knight doesn't fall to the same tropes that it felt like Batman Begins had sometimes with the dialogue, and Dark Knight Rises does. But I think Dark Knight Rises has like some pretty glaring holes in it at some points, which we'll get
Oh,
into.
hell
But
yeah.
at the Dark Knight, it's really hard for me to nitpick with because like all of the nitpicks that I have, it's still a masterpiece. Like it's an 11 out of 10 movie, you know,
Mhm.
like it's great. Even if you don't give a shit about Batman, it's super fun. It's great. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's really hard to take your eyes off the screen because there's always something happening either between Batman or Joker, and they give you a shit ton of Joker. And when he's on the
Mhm.
screen, he demands your attention, you know. Um, there's a reason that this is heralded as one of, if not the greatest comic book movies of all time. And I would probably put it at the very, very top. I know it's unpopular opinion, but I absolutely love Man of Steel. It's like that's like number one
Oh,
and
it's a
two for
great.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's not perfect. Like I can rip Man of Steel apart, like knowingly being a fan of that
Mhm.
movie. Dark Knight, I can't. So that's why I give it like probably the number one spot because
Mhm.
there's not much that I can really complain about this movie about because everybody gives it their best. Everybody gives it 100%. The boat sequence is cool. I don't find it as exhilarating as other people. I found it kind of cool. I just wish it would have been a little bit more chaotic, but it's also like it's really really a smart thing, and it gets your adrenaline pumping because of the two
Yeah.
boats. It's just
Yeah.
there's something in me that whenever that happens, it's like I want something a little bit more grandiose, like what we get in Dark Knight Rises. And
Mhm.
what you get, even in the very, very first one with Batman Begins, you get a lot more of these grandiose events, but also at the same time, you have like the heist at the beginning of The Dark Knight. You have the hospital scene. You have so many memorable scenes in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to want more at the end.
Mhm.
But maybe that's what it kind of falls victim to is you have so much buildup with Joker and so many iconic scenes in The Dark Knight that once you get to the boat scene, it's kind of like, dude, I just had a heist. I had this hospital. You just like did a whole pencil trick to these mafia mobsters and everything. And now we're just kind of sitting on a boat with a detonator up in a skyscraper. You know what
Well,
I mean?
yeah, and even prior to that, you have the scene with like where he has the news
With the
reporters
trucks.
hostage. No, I mean
Yeah.
like literally right before like Batman confronts Joker in that
Oh,
tower,
yeah. Yeah.
like right before that, he's like trying to save,
Yeah.
you know, these like the hostage flip thing where, you know, they're
Yeah.
aiming at the news reporters and the victims. Like that's an intense sequence too, and he's trying to save
Yeah.
everyone at the same time. And yeah, and then all of a sudden it's just like Joker and Batman, and it's like, oh man, like it's just the two boats and Joker and
Yeah,
Batman. I
exactly.
I get what you're saying, and I had a friend that actually brought this up, and it's always stuck with me. Do you? This is a hypothetical because it doesn't happen, obviously, but do you think it would have been better if both of the boats blew up, like thematically?
Probably because there would have been a lot more. Like I would probably put that it would have been done much better, but think Avengers and Iron Man 3 where the
Mhm.
whole movie is about like him reeling from like the PTSD and trauma that he has from that. I think
Mhm.
that would have been a really great plot point in The Dark Knight Rises. But there's already enough in The Dark Knight Rises, but it would have been kind of something cool. Like it could have been a little bit different. Like maybe in The Dark Knight Rises, like he's trying to pull Batman out of retirement because he's not dead. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like that could have been a whole different thing. And then all the grandiosity that you have in The Dark Knight Rises could have explained a lot more, but then it probably wouldn't have made sense with the way that, like, I think it's Peñaduros is what it's called in the comics. I don't know if they call it that in the Hole for. I think
Mhm.
they just call it the Hole in The Dark
They
Knight
just call it the
Rises.
hole in Dark Knight Rises, yeah.
Yeah, so, you have, like, that whole sequence. It probably wouldn't have made sense, but I think it would have ended a little bit better because Batman stopping all of these things and trying his best, which is the whole point of what Joker's trying to do, that, "Dude, you're human," is essentially what, like, the thing is. Like, you can't be
Mhm.
there for everyone all at the same time. You're gonna become crazy just like me doing what you do, you know?
Yeah.
That's at least what I take away from The Dark Knight, and I think that would have been the cherry on top, knowing that it's just these two boats and he stopped things greater, but he couldn't stop and save all these people's lives in a much more simplistic fashion, even though it's not that simple with the rules that are at play here when it comes to
Mhm.
the two boats and the way that it has to operate. But yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think that would have been great.
Yeah, he brought that up, and it always got me going because 'cause I'm like, that would have been a great way to kinda set up The Dark Knight Rises just in terms of, I mean, there's enough trauma here for him to kinda reel from as is, but I feel like that
Yeah.
would have been a really good ending to kinda set up for the third one. But I mean, I think that's what makes this movie, at least for me. I mean, I'm a huge Batman fan before these even came out, but like this is like the definitive comic book movie for me, is just because this is probably the deepest comic book movie in terms of like themes that are developed, and that theme that
Yeah.
you just said of like, like you're just a regular person. I love the theme too, where it's just like one bad day separates the both of them. I mean, like Bruce had his parents
Yeah.
die and he went a different direction. This Joker, I mean, he gives all his different kind of, multiple choice history stories with where he came from and what happened to him, which I fucking love.
Yeah.
But like, obviously something crazy happened to this dude. You don't know what it is, but he took a different path. So it's like they're kind of like the same person, but it's like they went two different directions with like, where their trauma or whatever happened to him. And I always loved that theme about Batman and Joker, and I thought Nolan played into that really, really well with this one. Let me ask you this, because like this is the thing that people always talk about, obviously, is Heath Ledger with this movie.
Hmm.
Do you think he carries this movie? Because that's just something that's been talked about over the past few years. As as time has gone on, people have just said like this is only a good movie because of Heath Ledger's performance.
See, I think that's short. I've heard that before.
Hmm.
And sometimes it doesn't take much to take a step back and realize how I'm trying to not make anybody that says that and is listening feel attacked with my answer to that.
Yeah, because there's people
Uh,
on Reddit and Discord that obviously
yeah,
have shared this opinion, and it's fine if you have that
yeah.
opinion. We don't
No, the
mind it,
thing,
but it's just one I kind of wanted to
yeah.
explore.
No, for sure. Yeah, you're right to feel every way, but I always feel like there's a logical way. I feel like it's not a logical response to say that because you're shorthanding thousands of people that worked on this movie. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? The thing is it's not like The Dark Knight is a bad movie and Heath Ledger just like ad libbed every single thing that he did, just showed up on set. Like there are some movies that are out there. Like I'll throw one out there. Death Wish inherently
Hmm.
isn't that good of a movie. It's very, very simple. I'm talking about the Charles Bronson one from way back, but
Hmm.
he carries that movie because it's very, very average at best. But I love that movie because Charles Bronson just goes 110% crazy in that movie.
Yeah.
He carries that movie because there's, again, like I'm not trying to shorthand everybody else. He still had a script to work with, but he just elevated it. That's something I can only see Charles Bronson doing.
Hmm.
The thing is like Heath Ledger was given a good script. He was given a good environment.
Yeah.
He was given a good theme. He was given good direction. He was given a good everything. You know what I mean? So that's shorthanding, I think, Christian Bale, which again, it takes chemistry between two people to make it work, especially with
Hmm.
like the interrogation scene. That's shorthanding Christopher Nolan in every single way as a director. That's also shorthanding the casting director. So you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's shorthanding so many people because we we really don't know what could have been with the other people that could have been Joker. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And the thing is, and I know this might be blasphemy to me others, is like as great as Heath Ledger was, there could have been somebody that came around and did better. There could have been
Mhm.
somebody else. Let's say he had filming obligations that could have done worse, that
Mhm.
was a stand-in, that filled in, that did this and did that. So like while I do agree that he's the best part of the movie, I don't think
Mhm.
that he carries what is inherently a good script, great cinematography, because it has some gorgeous shots, some really good angles, and what is a very, very solid script. I don't think it's like, world like breaking, earth shattering script, but I think it's good enough. Christian
Yeah.
Bell and everybody in the cast just really wanted to give it that you can tell they cared for being on set and really wanted to try.
Yeah.
Everybody in the movie. There's not a single person like Aaron Eckhart. Like he does great. I
Yeah,
could
his arc
literally
is
give him
incredible too.
yeah, like the thing is like even though Joker's in it more, I
Mhm.
don't think Aaron gets enough credit for how much work he does. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And how great of a job
100%.
that he brings. I think he's an underrated actor. Everything I've ever seen him in, he's great,
He's fantastic. The scene with,
Yeah.
like, the coin toss, like, where he has that guy hostage and he's flipping the coin and, Batman
Yeah.
pops up and they have that little dialogue, like, where he's just screaming. Like, I remember, like, I jumped in the theater, like, when he just, like, shouts because he was just so intense in that scene.
Yeah.
He does a fantastic job, and I agree with you 100%. I think and this happens with a lot of movies, not just The Dark Knight. I mean,
It does.
there's some movies that come out and then, maybe like a performance is like incredible or the cinematography or whatever, and then something stands out in that movie and then we kind of, 10, 20 years later we're like, "Oh, that movie was just good because of this element." But I agree 100%. Like the reason Heath was able to kind of develop that kind of Joker is because Nolan set the groundwork for a more realistic, gritty,
Yeah.
you know, b- uh, Joker, and
Yeah.
the way that Joker came about, from what I recall, is like several phone calls with Heath Ledger and Nolan. They were like talking Clockwork Orange. They were talking like a whole bunch of different elements like together. And I mean, as Heath Ledger delivers like a fantastic, probably the best comic book performance, at least in my opinion,
Yeah.
for a character in terms of originality and just obviously maintaining the core of what that character is, but you can't do that without like you said, like a team behind you, like that you
Yeah.
need. So there's so many different elements that play into that, and this script, I saw an interview with Christian Bale talking about it. Is the script still caters to Batman as much as
Yeah.
people may kind of argue that, and again, it's fine if that's your argument, your it's your opinion, but I think this script, it's written for Batman. It's like
Yeah.
it's not a Joker movie whatsoever. It's written for him to kind of go through this arc where it's like, he's really trying, and like you said, he's trying his best, but he can't save everyone. He's putting these situations with Joker where he's making like almost impossible choices. It's like, choose one boat or the other, or this hospital is going to blow up and maybe this one's not. Like, it's like, what do you do in that situation? It's like, take off your mask, or else I'm going to kill a whole bunch of people. Like, he's put in a
Yeah.
lot of like different situations that test him not only as like a character, but just a lot of the themes of the movie in general. So like this script is written as a Batman like
No, for sure.
movie. And I think I agree 100% where it's like, Heath Ledger delivers an incredible performance, but I don't I get what people say, he carries the movie because he's just so intense.
Yeah.
But
He's the best
it's
part of it. It's what
for
draws you.
sure, absolutely, and I
Yeah.
think it's fair to say that he's definitely the
Yeah.
best part of it. But I think there's so many different elements that come together to make him the best
Yeah.
part of the movie. So yeah, that's a common thing I think people have been saying, especially with the Matt Reeves one that came out. I know that when that one was released, there was a lot of comparisons between Matt Reeves' Batman and The Dark Knight. Everyone was. I remember just so many posts on Reddit where it was like, which one's the better movie? And I hate making that comparison just because they're so
Yeah.
different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They came out at different times. They're dealing with different themes, different Batmans, different stories, and it's like it's definitely difficult to kind of compare them. If I had to, I'd still say The Dark Knight. Um,
Yeah.
but I see why people maybe would say Reeves, just because maybe that's their Dark Knight. Maybe that's the one they grew up with, and like you were mentioning earlier, nostalgia just plays such a huge role into this sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I just wanted to get the Heath Ledger Joker thing out of the way because that's the biggest part of the movie when people reflect on it is his character and his portrayal with it, and he
Yeah.
won a fucking Academy Award for it, which was freaking incredible.
Yeah.
I
And
I
yeah, I agree.
I want to see his like little diary. Apparently, he kept like a little diary when he was developing this character.
You haven't seen it?
I seen photos of it. I want to see like
okay.
a
You
real. I
want
know
to
the
actually read
family.
it?
Oh hey, hell
Yeah,
yeah, dude! I'd freaking
yeah.
if they release that, I'd buy it day one.
Yeah, because I was about to say, I'm pretty sure there's at least 5 or 6 images on there. Because wasn't he inspired by The Crow as well? Like, if I'm right, it wasn't it The Crow and Clockwork Orange.
I know
Like,
Clockwork Orange. The Crow. I don't remember if he brought up the Crow or not. There were
yeah,
so
I'm
many
just
different like
curious.
elements that they had like kind of strung together for that character. Um, and you can kind of see some of some of that like it's so unique the Joker they kind of developed. But it's you can't trace it back to obviously like Kubrick and other things like that because
Yeah,
it's just so quirky and weird, but like gritty and scary at the same time. Um, yeah. I don't know if The Crow was that's actually a good question. If you guys know, comment down below. I don't
yeah.
know personally. I don't think it is. I think Kubrick was the biggest
Was he?
inspiration. Yeah, I think at least from the conversations I've seen with like Nolan talking about it and reflecting on it, was like Clockwork Orange was the biggest one that influenced that character. But like you said, I mean, it's not just Joker. I mean, Aaron Eckhart does an amazing job with that Toothface, and that this I'll give it this too. The CGI on that Toothface looks fucking
Is
incredible
great.
even today. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, how old is this movie? Like, freaking, it's over. Is it over
16 years?
60, 60 almost 20 years old, dude? And that CGI looks freaking fantastic in that movie.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, whenever things bake for a while,
Mm-hmm.
you get it done, you take your time, you have money, and you have a team behind you. And Warner Brothers isn't like, I mean, I at least hope that they were giving him time because I remember like there was no release date for Dark Knight Rises. It just kind of trailer dropped, and then it's like, hey, it's coming out in like the next year and a half.
Yeah, they let him kind of sit. Well, he had done Inception too, I think, in
That's
between.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's
like
right.
he had a little bit of time to kind of boil it over. And I guess the last thing to talk about with the Dark Knight is and we talked about it during our last podcast too, but just the IMAX cinematography, dude. This is where he
Mm.
like popularized the use of IMAX, and I think it shows. At least when I saw it when this came out, like I literally remember we went to a 70 millimeter screening, and it was like the most intense thing that I had experienced at that time, just because like the screen was just so fucking huge, dude. It was nuts, and
Yeah, massive.
it really just kind of absorbs you. And I think like that decision he made was genius, at least to me. It's like why don't you utilize this format? Like why isn't anyone using it? Now it's just common. It's just like a normal thing. But at the time it was like everyone was hyping it up. Everyone's like, you're using IMAX cameras? That's so weird.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember I respect him a lot for straying away from 3D because when these movies were coming out, that's when it
Yeah.
was like at its peak.
Yeah, Avatar was out, right? Around this time?
Yeah, Avatar came out 09, I want to say, and Dark Knight was 08.
Oh, okay. So it was like right
Yeah.
before. Yeah, but the 3D thing with like the Marvel movies and everything was kind of
Yeah,
coming back.
really picking up around that time. So like when
Yeah.
Dark Knight Rises came out, like I was literally I remember cuz I man, maybe that's why I forget how long these movies were. I did a marathon, so AMC way back when Dark Knight Rises. I got to see it, I think it was like 5 or 6 days early. But you
Mm.
had to go see it, and this was like before reservations, and you had to like if you wanted good seats, you had to like wait outside the
Oh,
theater door.
dude.
You know what I mean? Like
God, man.
you couldn't
People
just
don't
show
know
up
that
and
nowadays, dude. Like
dude,
I
for real, like
remember I was
a
in line
blessing.
like at 6 or 7 p.m. I shit you not, for I think it was the Dark Knight. I think it was like
Yeah.
6 o'clock. People are already there too, mind you. You get there and there's already people waiting. Like
Yeah.
they've been there since maybe noon. So like that's how it used to be before we had the apps and the choose your seat thing. It was like you had to,
So
if you
much
wanted
better
a good
now.
seat, you had to show up early. And it was like I think
Yeah.
we were there for a good 6 hours before the movie like
Yeah,
showed. It was
dude.
nuts.
I got into that one like 3 hours early, so I waited outside the door for 3 hours, and it was a
Hmm.
Batman Begins, Dark Knight, and Dark Knight Rises, like, just
Hmm.
all seamlessly together, no trailers, just boom. I think between Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, avenue or, revenue and stuff.
Yeah.
But I also remember this is funny, they accidentally jumped whenever it came to The Dark Knight Rises. They went straight to that scene at the end of Dark Knight Rises with Talia, Bane, and
No
Batman. So, like,
way.
as soon as the, ads finished rolling or the commercials or fucking trailers, I don't know why I'm talking about like
Yeah.
it's TV, then it just jumped straight to
Oh
that right into it, dude.
no.
Yeah, dude, and it played for like 5 minutes, man. It was
Dude, I
crazy.
would have ran
Yeah.
out that theater. I would have jumped over people.
People were
That's crazy.
booing, people were like, this was when, like I also think people forget, I mean, not everybody, but like for younger generations, they might forget like how different theater experiences were then. Like you
Mhm.
didn't talk, but it was a lot more reactionary, if it makes sense, you know,
Yeah.
like boos, oohs, ahs. Like I remember whenever the first Expendables trailer popped up in
Mhm.
theaters around this, it wasn't too far off from the same time. I think I was like 2011. And whenever like Chuck Norris popped up and like his name was on there, I remember the whole fucking theater just
Theater,
going
yeah,
absolutely
exploded.
batshit crazy. Yeah.
It was a more
Like it was
communal
just more reaction.
experience, especially, like,
Yeah.
pre-COVID. I mean, but yeah, especially, like, 10, 15 years ago, it was just a kinda different culture and a different vibe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could totally see that happening. Did you see it on, was it film or digital at the time?
I don't remember.
Yeah, because I think,
I'd have to
when
say digital.
yeah, because I think when Dark Knight Rises came out, that's when it was, like, a toss-up of which one you saw, like, if it was, like, 70 millimeter or, like, 35 millimeter
Yeah.
and, like, digital, but I think when The Dark Knight came out, it was 35 millimeter and 70 millimeter. I don't remember,
I
but
know I saw because Dark Knight was IMAX, right?
yeah.
Yeah. That's what you're saying? I saw that in IMAX. I went
Yeah.
opening night to that one. I remember that because that was like sometimes, like, I always forget how many times I went to IMAX because I think even, like, I was talking to you just even, like, a few months ago. I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to my first I" it was for Hereditary, I believe, in IMAX, the
Oh,
IMAX
yeah, yeah.
re-release, and I was like, "This will be my first IMAX." And it was just my first IMAX in a while because as soon as I stepped in there, I was like, "I've been in places like this." Whenever I
Yeah.
was staying in Seattle for a little while, they have this massive theater that's just on the strip of this building, like, going
Mhm.
skywards, and they just it was the biggest theater I'd ever seen. It was so massive, and I didn't realize I had went to see Avengers in IMAX. And it's the same thing. Like that theater was massive whenever I went to go see The
Yeah.
Dark Knight. Like it was huge. And it was also like I remember not being impressed with like the detail was good, but I remember the exposure being absolutely out of this world. Like the brightness levels and the contrast.
Mm.
It was
Yeah.
pretty crazy. Like sometimes it wasn't always like the best experience depending on the theater that you went to. And I
Yeah,
remember that one
theater
was
and the
just like a
film
local
stock and
release.
everything.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Dark Knight, man, I really would sit here and say that that's like top of the
Oh,
chair,
yeah.
man. Like,
It's still the, at least to me personally, I know people are gonna
yeah.
differ, but, like, it's the best comic book movie that's ever been made, and I still don't think it's been topped
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah, it's, like, there's movies that I probably pop in, like, Dark Knight, I consider, like, a serious fun type of movie,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? But there's probably, like, if I'm looking at my shelf, I wouldn't be opposed to just popping in a much more goofier one. Like, I'm probably not gonna put
Yeah.
in a Marvel movie over it, maybe Avengers if I really wanna get that, like, Team Assemble type of vibe. But there's
Yeah.
sometimes, man, I just wanna pop in, like, Batman Forever and just turn my brain off and just let the colors
For
blast
sure.
my DNA.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
100%.
Like
I mean, it's like, like, we don't always wanna watch 2001 or, like, Godfather, you know
yeah,
what I mean?
right,
It's like, there's
exactly.
some other movies we wanna watch 100% more, but I think obviously the quality is there, and
Yeah.
we appreciate it for what it is, so, yeah, the Dark Knight is definitely at least, I mean, so you agree, so I think the order, at least for us, is, like, Dark Knight, and then we just differ on the order with, like, Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises, which we're gonna get into now is The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, pretty much. Cause yeah, I just finished that like 2 or 3 minutes before we got on here, so
Interesting,
that
man.
one's fresh. I had to skip around like a little bit, so maybe there's like maybe a total of 10, 15 minutes just so I can make sure I was ready for this,
Mhm.
because I ran way behind. But Dark Knight Rises, man, I mean, I've only seen it once, and it was during that same exact thing I was talking about whenever I went to that marathon early screening. That's my first and only time that I've seen it. I've watched like trailers and clips because I really love the stadium scene a lot. I think that's very well done, very
Yeah.
well executed. I love Bane. I'm, like, the only person in this world that actually likes his voice. I think
I
it's,
love
like,
his
super
voice,
oh,
dude.
do
I
you
think it's
really?
freaking, I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's just like another, it, Nolan like took, and obviously Tom Hardy, they just took liberty to kind of do something different, and I don't know what the issue is with that. Like, I mean, I know people were like, it sounds weird, or he sounds like an old man, or he sounds like
Yeah.
it's like an old man mixed with like a, I forget. It's actually based off some boxer. I forget the boxer's name. But this boxer that Tom Hardy said, like, was like, I think it's like from the 50s or something, that talks just like that almost. Like, that was like his inspiration for it. So it's,
Interesting.
I like it. I think it's unique. I think it's different. It doesn't need to be a freaking, Hispanic accent like you're used to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's different, and it's like I really like it. The only thing and they did a good job with it, it's just, like, again, Nolan sound mixing.
Yeah.
You can definitely tell that it's dubbed over on these scenes.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, there should have just been a little bit of location timing with the way that it sounds because it blasts the front channels whenever you're, like, right there, and it's the loudest thing whenever he's talking, unless there's
Yes.
something else going on, like, it's super minor. It didn't take me out of it, but it's also, it just kind of has that level of disconnection because you'll have the articulate sound
Mhm.
timing whenever it comes to like Batman being over here, but Bane's all the way over here to the right, but he sounds like he's right in front of me. But meanwhile, Batman's voice is perfectly located right here and it sounds appropriate for the channel it's
Do you
coming
know
out
the
of.
story behind that? So, like,
No,
the
is it pretty
nerdy
goofy?
bat I mean, a little bit. So, like, when this movie came out, so, like, just like when The Dark Knight came out, uh, a few months before, like, there was I remember it was like you could see the prologue for it in IMAX or
Yeah.
whatever. I think you had to go see, like, Mission Impossible, and you could see the first 10 minutes of The Dark Knight in IMAX.
Oh,
And
that's fucking
they had
awesome.
done the same thing with, like, The Dark Knight Rises. I forgot what movie it was. It's like, see this movie, and you can see the first 10 minutes of The Dark Knight Rises in IMAX. So people were complaining during that prologue, like in the theaters, that like the Bane voice was kind of like hard to kind of like it was, at least from what I recall, because I remember seeing the prologue, it was like a lot more kind of like what you said, like there's location timing. It was kind of like blended into the environment a little bit more.
Yeah.
But some people were like, I can't like understand it. Like, so when I saw it theatrically, I was like, what the hell? Like, there was a big drastic change either with the mix or either Tom Hardy dubbing some of it over. I don't know if some of it's still on YouTube, but at the time people were like posting comparison videos of like what the prologue sounded in the theater versus like the
Hmm.
theatrical cut. So there was something that happened there. And I mean, ever since then, I mean, obviously Nolan's had issues with like people complaining with the sound mixing, which
Yeah.
I love Nolan to death, but I'm not going to
Yeah.
defend him on that. Like, it's there are
It's
some
hard
times like
to, bro.
in Tenet, dude, like when that music's blasting in at that the beginning part, and they're
Yeah.
talking over the music, I'm like, what the hell are they saying? I can't understand it whatsoever. Um, but yeah, that's the story behind kind of like the maybe why it sounds like it's like just like a lot more like center channel, just full blast, because it did take me by surprise when I saw it theatrically. I'm like, this is not how I remember it sounding.
Yeah. I don't remember. I remember a lot of people still complaining even whenever it came to like the theatrical release that like his accent was hard to understand. It's like,
Mhm.
what do you mean? He's talking so fucking slow. Like, you
Yeah,
know
I
what
know,
I
right?
mean? Like, what do you mean? Like, I could understand it if like the volume, but it's like, dude, he's front and center. It's loud.
Mhm.
You can hear it. And he talks very slow. So that way you can't say that and you still can't understand him. Do you want to
Yeah.
listen to it at half speed? Like, what do you want?
You want
You
subtitles
know?
or something? Like,
Yeah, exactly, right? So it's like, yeah, that's a minor complaint with that one. I used to complain about the ending that I didn't like the association or like the whole Alfred with um Catwoman and Bruce Wayne at the end at the cafe, but I guess I just never realized until this watch through that literally it's predicted at the very beginning
yeah,
whenever
there's
Alfred's talking to
foreshadowing
him.
with it.
Yeah, like there's massive like correct me if I'm wrong, but he's essentially saying like the times that he's disappeared, he goes to this very specific cafe and just hopes that he shows up there one day, and then that's
Yeah.
essentially what
Yeah,
happens.
because like I think
Yeah,
they touched upon it in Batman Begins, where even when he sees Alfred the first time, it's been years since he had seen Alfred. So like there
yeah,
are moments in time where Bruce would just kind of disappear, and Alfred would just kind of like his dream was like, I wish I could just see you happy, pretty much, with like a wife and some kids or whatever.
yeah,
But in particular with that cafe, so I liked it because it was kind of foreshadowing not only from Batman Begins, but also like what you said, that scene where he's like, yeah, I've been wanting this for you for years.
yeah, exactly. So like it worked a lot better, but there was actually something that worked a lot less for me this watch through,
Hmm.
and that's the Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character. I like
Mm.
him, but it's
Mhm.
like it felt more organic whenever I watched it. I used to actually defend that part of the movie to a lot of people because I know some people have some gripes with it. But the thing is like it just really makes no sense why all of a sudden this guy's getting all of the the bat armory.
Yeah,
Like
he's
he just
getting
picks up the
the
duffel
torch
bag and
passed to
just
him.
you
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's like it's just like I think that's a failure on his end to like like Levitt's character should have been there from at least Dark Knight. I can understand if he's not in
It would have
Batman
been more
Begins.
powerful.
It would have been a lot more powerful. It would have made a lot more sense versus like in reality, you don't know this guy. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
he's got like, the files on him, has been studying him and sees him as worthy,
Mhm.
but that's not necessarily explained. It's just kind of forced.
Yeah.
Like even like if Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character had like 10 minutes of screen time, I think it would have worked a lot better, in Dark
I agree
Knight.
with you 100%. I
Um,
mean, he just
yeah,
I mean, even when so this is the one I have issue. I still love The Dark Knight Rises. Like I watch it,
yeah,
and it has its, like you said, holes and issues with it, which I completely acknowledge. It's the weakest one to me.
Yeah.
But his character for sure, because like when he sits down, when he goes to Bruce Wayne's manor, and he's like, "Yeah, I know you're Batman." It's like, okay, like I remember seeing that, and I was like, so like how do you know that he's
Yeah.
and I mean, and I get it. There's the narrative there of like I was an orphan too and all that stuff, but I'm like that's still kind of far fetched to like
Yeah.
where you could
To
just
just
go to someone's house and be like, yeah, I know you're Batman. And like, what if he's not? And you just look like a complete weirdo and a
yeah.
moron, and you're a police officer. So it was just it's a weird character, but he's really just there at the end. He serves that function of like, hey, I'm passing the torch and legacy to you.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, I really like it. Like, I think that scene at the very end with the bridge is extremely powerful, really well done.
Oh yeah.
Um, I don't have as many complaints as, like, Catwoman just coming in and blasting Bane through the wall.
I
I know
hate
some
that
people
part.
really yeah,
I
dude, it's
fucking
like
can't, dude. I was so
it's
pissed when I saw that. I was like,
it's
literally, that's how he
yeah.
goes out.
It's not a good finale for what is, like, if you really think about it, one of if not I mean, I could argue that Bane is his deadliest villain in the entire comic books,
Mhm.
just because of the Nightfall arc, but it's not a fitting end for somebody like that, you know what I
No,
mean?
yeah.
And I really don't like and it still doesn't work for me, but the whole Talia thing, it just doesn't really work for me.
Yeah, I don't know if it's her, and it sucks because that actress, I always forget her name. She's actually a great actress. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
a lot of movies I've seen with her, and she's she does fantastic. And but there was something about her, like, and you know what? I'll even give her this. Like, I think she does a great job in this movie up to when she's revealed as being Talia. Like, for some reason,
Yeah.
like it's just like when she has to play the menacing part of her character,
Yeah.
I just don't get it. It's just it feels kind of like forced.
It does, and it's also like so it I don't know, unless, like, there's just, like, very and maybe this is, like, something you can explain since you've dissected the movies, but it makes no sense why a tiny knife can just, like, go straight into him through the bat
Oh,
suit.
well,
It really doesn't, like
they
because
explain
like,
it
I
in the
mean
second one. I mean, that's because that's where remember he goes to Fox and he wants to be able to turn his head and be more flexible, and he's like, "Hey, just letting you know that if we do that, we're separating your plates, and you're gonna be exposed more to knives and
Oh,
gunfire." So he's like,
yeah,
"Okay, like
that's right.
I'll take that, risk." But I mean, that was eh, eh, that's 8 years before this movie technically, or 7 years before
Yeah,
this movie. So like
yeah.
but
She
that's
just
why.
knew the right angle, like, that makes sense then. It's just I found it goofy because then there's that spot whenever he's chasing them down after the stock exchange and he gets shot by the cop. It's like, "Okay, dude, but you just took a bullet, and now you just took a
Does he get
knife?"
I mean,
Like
it's his equipment that gets shot. I don't think he gets shot.
oh, really? I thought I mean, maybe I was just, overanalyzing it. It looked like it got him, like, right there on the shoulder. Maybe he did because that cop looked like he had shitty aim anyways, so he probably got
Yeah, he
right.
hits really shitty. Yeah, I mean, he hits the
It's
thing and he
stormtrooper
turns
aim.
around and he's like, "Hey, like, what the fuck are you doing?"
Yeah,
kind of deal.
exactly.
But I mean,
Yeah.
it is kind of like a yeah, I mean, it's a small little knife and he just
Yeah.
he gets stabbed. When in Dark Knight he got shot by like Harvey Dent like 2 or 3 times and was still able to kind of
Yeah,
jump
exactly.
up and
Yeah.
take him on, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
I get
interesting.
that. I mean, but I agree with you. I think so the biggest issue with this movie to me is, man, it's Bane's a great villain, and I get why Nolan went with Bane. I remember seeing a lot of the interviews where with his rationale where it's like this is like what you said, Bane can be like literally the most menacing villain for Batman, not just in terms of like violence and like brute strength, like physical strength, but
Yeah.
like Bane in the comics is actually like a genius. Like he's a genius. Like his IQ level
Yeah.
is like super up there. So
He's
he
crazy,
thought,
yeah.
as a climax, it's like, why not have someone who's incredibly smart and incredibly like physically powerful go up against Batman? So I'm like, yeah, that makes sense as, choosing him as your final villain. But then it it starts like what you said, the Talia stuff, the League of Shadows stuff, and it's like I get he was trying to make like an arc with like Batman Begins, but I'm like,
Yeah.
you technically didn't need that. I
Yeah,
like
you didn't.
Bane could have been his own force of nature, and I
Yeah.
feel like it would have probably been better. I mean, it was cool seeing Liam Neeson again during that little flashback sequence, and I'm like, that's a cool little
Yeah.
tie-in. But it really doesn't serve the movie, I think, or it doesn't serve Bane as a villain either.
You wanna know something else in Dark Knight Rises that doesn't do shit, and I know why they did it,
What?
is whenever Commissioner Gordon's giving his speech about, like, Harvey Dent, and it just has that random jump scare.
The jump scare. The
Yeah, like, he's on the podium, and then it's just got, like, this screechy sound effect and brings up Harvey Dent on the screen really quick. Like, for, like, literally point 0.5 to 1 second.
Oh, you mean like, yeah, where like the little
Yeah.
flashback part?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
and then goes away. And I
Is it?
get why it's
I think it's like when I watch it, it's like quiet. It's just like a subtle, like it's like the
Is it
screen
really?
flashes. Yeah.
Maybe I imagined it was a jump scare because it like took me aback. I was like,
No,
because I
yeah,
was like
it's
intensely on Commissioner Gordon, and then that popped up. I was like, what the fuck was
it's
that?
just like very soft music, and the
Yeah,
screen flashes, and there's no volume of
yeah.
like the of him
Oh, there's
screaming.
not?
There's just
Okay, and that
yeah,
makes
yeah.
perfect sense. Because like I got so engrossed in that, but I was just like, what the hell was it? Like I get why they're doing that. It's to show
Mhm.
you like things can be
The
spontaneous,
trauma,
you
yeah,
know.
that he's
Yeah,
going
the
through
trauma
from like
response
his
from
kid
it and
getting shot,
stuff.
or not shot, but getting the
Yeah,
gunning, and then yeah, yeah.
yeah. That's kind of what yeah, that was something in that one. Otherwise, man, I really liked the movie. It's just like, damn, I really didn't realize this movie was almost 3 hours long.
It's a
I put it
long
in there, I
movie,
was like,
dude.
"Cool, I'm gonna get my workouts on, I'm gonna get this done," and then I realized, like, 2 hours and 44 minutes, like,
I mean,
"Shit,
it's
I'm gonna
I
get it to
get
the
it. I'm
ringer."
not gonna
Yeah,
hold it against it because it's like the finale. It's like, why not make it like this big, climactic, long, movie? But the reason I don't like this one is just it takes away a lot of the grounded nature from the franchise. Like it's like
yeah,
like the city's like getting bombed, and then like the military's involved, and like I don't know how Bruce Wayne gets back into Gotham City like after his back's broken. Like I don't understand that whatsoever. Like it just doesn't make sense. Like it's like it goes to like these far narrative stretches that just like you don't have in part one and part two. Like part one and part two, I feel
yeah,
like are very grounded, and they're reasonable in terms of like the jumps he's making. But with this, it's like so far fetched. I'm like, how, like if the military is protecting Gotham City, doesn't want anyone in or out. You just came back from the Middle East with your back broken, dude, and you were able to find a way into Gotham. Like, how? How did you do that? When he pops up
yeah,
to see Catwoman, I'm like, how are you here? And he doesn't even
yeah,
explain how he got there. Like these are the issues I had with this movie, where it's like I don't get it. Anne
yeah,
Hathaway's great as Catwoman. I think she plays a fantastic Catwoman. I
yeah,
think
I
she
agree.
kills it. I
Yeah,
love
she's
the
great.
little the dynamic she has with like, like help me, I'm a victim kind of deal, and how she could just instantly cut to like, the villain that we all love, or the anti-hero that we all love. So I mean, I think she
Yeah,
does a great job with it. It's a fun movie, you know what I mean? It's not incredible. I still have a fun time watching it. But it's weird, man. My wife likes The Dark Knight Rises more than The Dark Knight. And it's
interesting. I can
interesting, and
understand.
I've seen a lot of reaction videos where people are watching like with their wife or girlfriend. For some reason, and I'm not trying to make a sexist remark here, women like The
Yeah,
Dark Knight Rises more than The Dark Knight.
interesting. I've never
Yeah.
really like I mean, I've always known that The Dark Knight Rises is like more underappreciated than the rest of the two. Like people didn't like it as a finale, but most of the time, man, like just universally, people are almost never going to be happy with the finale because the story's done. So if
Yeah.
there's like, one thing that's like, damn, I need that answer, like, okay, I'm not saying this is how you feel, but let's just say there's somebody out there like, damn it, Batman got back in the city after the hole and it doesn't tell me why. Fuck this movie. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
screw it.
Like,
Yeah.
because you're never gonna get the answer unless Christopher Nolan's like, yeah, man, he just kind of like just walked up into Gotham, man.
Just walked
He's
in.
Bruce
Yeah.
Wayne.
That's
Yeah.
fair. That makes
So it's like,
100% sense.
yeah, it's like I think the only time I've ever seen a finale that was like universally loved. I mean, we can go further back. I'm just talking about recent memory is like TV shows. Some people like
Mm.
that can be done well and stuff like that, but I can't really think of okay,
Lord of the
Maxine, perfect
Rings.
example. Yeah, Lord of the Rings is a perfect example of recent one where people weren't as happy, but it wasn't like it's not like people didn't like it, but Maxine was a great example. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? It's like it's the finale, the story's done. So it's like, you're always gonna want more. It's gonna be really hard to appeal to everybody.
Yeah, you're gonna
So
dissect the
yeah,
ending. It's like,
yeah,
you're
because you
never gonna
want more.
appeal to everyone. Yeah, everyone wants it to end a different way. So there's no
Yeah,
way to make it
exactly.
perfect. I feel like Lord of the Rings is probably the only one that's like, I guess, like universally held as like, yeah, that was a great finale.
Yeah,
But yeah, I agree. I mean, I still like this movie. You know what I mean? It's like I give like Dark Knight 10 out of 10. I'd probably give Batman like a 9 out of 10 or 9.5 out of 10. And then I just give Dark Knight Rises like an 8 out of 10. Like it's not like a huge blow to the movie. It's just like it suffers a little bit because of it from a narrative perspective, but I still love it. I think
yeah,
the important part with this trilogy is Bruce Wayne, and I feel like the
yeah,
arc he goes through and where he ends up, it's perfect, and I think that I wouldn't change anything about that. So at least that was handled with care, and I think with respect. I think he really, really garnered towards the source material, but also went with like making his own, version of this world, and he knocked it out of the park, dude.
yeah. I agree. Yeah, I really liked Dark Knight Rises. It's definitely one I need to rewatch more because I can't believe, like, whenever I sat down to watch it, I was like, damn, it's really been 12 years since I've watched this.
It
It's
still
crazy,
looks
man.
great too. Like, I mean, that
It
one as
does.
well. Like, you said, the football stadium sequence, and then you get the national anthem playing in the background when
Yeah.
it's like, I love that scene, dude. It's
Yeah.
so well done. Really,
And it
really well
really
done.
shows, like, his intellect, like, not really, but, like, it really shows, like, his like for art because he's like, "What a lovely voice,"
Yeah.
whenever they're singing, and
Yeah.
so, I don't know why, but that one gave me a giggle. I was like, I mean, that's kinda cool because, like, they show that he's a strategic genius, but it also doesn't
Mhm.
show him, at least from what I was, paying attention to the most, it doesn't really show him as, like, a person of upper class taste, if you know what I'm
Mhm.
trying to say, because
Yeah.
he is. He's a mercenary and everything in the comic
Yeah.
books, but he also does have, like, an upper class style of taste in the comic
Mhm.
books, you know?
Yeah.
So it's kinda cool, but, I mean, I always say, I like to judge things for what they are, and Tom Hardy is one of my favorite actors in the game. That movie's actually what, like, made me fall in love with, like, Hardy as an actor and
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
like that. I
Incredible
think he
actor.
killed it. Fun fact for people that don't know or haven't seen it, but Google the image from after he took the mask off, because he's like in the behind the scenes, because he
Mhm.
had like a mad sunburn going straight
Oh,
down his
crap.
head. Yeah, from the mask.
And then
So
just
he's
a
got like,
line.
yeah, he's just got these lines. It's the funniest looking shit ever because I could only imagine, you being an actor and then you going through that, and then you look in the mirror and you're like, how the fuck do I get this? You
Yeah, how do
know
I
what
get
I
yeah,
mean?
I mean, I have a role I have to do in, like, a week from now, and I got this, like, Bane,
Yeah.
outline on my face. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I
He's gonna have to get
always
spray
laughed
tanned.
that Nolan kinda did him dirty because you haven't seen Dunkirk yet, but
No.
Hardy's in Dunkirk, and then,
Yeah.
like, his primary role in that movie, he's a fighter pilot, like, in an
Oh, hell yeah.
airplane, but he has a mask on the whole time in the movie, bro. Like, the whole
Yeah.
movie he has a mask on, and I'm like, Nolan literally had to go back to Hardy and be like, "Hey, I want you to play this role." He's like, "Cool, what is it?" He's like, "You're gonna wear a mask the whole time and fly in this." And I'm like, "Dude, like you did him so dirty doing that twice in a row." Like, I
Yeah.
just thought it was funny. When you watch it, you might get a kick out of that because it's just a funny little uh turn of events.
Yeah, I definitely need to, get that rocking and rolling. I need to watch more of Nolan. I still have, like, The Prestige and all of that, but I really do have a fondness for this trilogy,
Yeah,
and it seems like obviously you do too. That's from your favorite
yeah,
director.
it's
It's
held up well, man.
it's also really easy for me to separate this body of work from the rest. Like, I don't go watch Tenet and be like, "Oh, well, what from The Dark Knight, like, cinematography wise, am I gonna get out
Hmm.
of this?" Like, I always take each of his movies as different because he's always trying to do something as a big time filmmaker and make it unique.
Yeah.
You can tell when you're watching a Nolan movie to a degree because of the sound mixing purely almost, but it's he presents beautiful worlds for you and he puts a lot of thought. I can never knock him for that, for effort, for trying and what he does. I can't
Yeah.
sit here and say there's not a movie of his I don't like or I would be like, I'm not rewatching that. Tenet even I'd rewatch tons of times. I find it to be
Hmm.
a fun movie when you had me watch that, but I think that's a really good note to end this one on.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
for
that's
sure,
a
man.
really great dissection and conversation we had about the highs and lows of the series.
Yeah, so we'll try to do this with other movies, guys, with other franchises, films, whatever. But we appreciate you guys for listening. Let us know down below your thoughts on the Dark Knight trilogy, how you'd maybe rank it, which one your favorite is, and we will dialogue with you guys in the comments as well. So feel free to leave the comments down below. And as always, we appreciate you guys for listening. Thanks.
Later, everybody.